Well. Good evening, lovely people. I hope you are extremely well on this Tuesday evening. Clock's gone back. It's dark outside. It's all grand. And tonight we have a very lovely lady on who will join us in a minute, no doubt. I'll just give it a bit of time. Have a wee drink. Hope you're well, folks, wherever you are. Busy old day today. Bit of Zwift racing, bit of riding out on the road. All good. I hope everyone is well. What's happening in everyone else's world right now? Drop us a message. Say g'day. We've got Naomi coming on in a little bit, which will be super cool. A 24-hour bike racer, which is Naomi. Let's get her on. Here we go. We are live. Happy days, mate. You made it.
Yeah.
How are you doing this evening, mate? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good after I worked out what button to push.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, it's always the hardest thing getting going. It's a bit like a bike race, isn't it? Once you get off the start line, it's fine. Everything just takes care of itself.
Yeah.
So that is all good. So whereabouts are you in the lovely world tonight?
I live in Edinburgh, up in Scotland.
Okay, so yeah, how's the temps up there?
Do you know, it's been pretty cold the last week. We've had the sort of low-level mist, so it's been really misty, but actually getting above it's been glorious. So once you get above it, it's really nice and blue and sunny. You just gotta.
Yeah. We've had it very similar here, actually, here in Yorkshire. It's kind of funny riding up Craig Vale and you're riding up kind of, it's clear, and then you go into the mist, and then you pop out the top. It's like, what a lovely day this is. Yeah.
Everyone's complaining about it being grim as well, and it's like, oh, such a grim day. I'm like, I've just got to make the effort to go up.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Absolutely. So let's talk mountain biking, mate. Because, like, doing a bit of research on you here, my dear, you're a bit of a weapon at 24-hour mountain bike racing, and you've won 3 national titles back to back. I'm sure this year probably would have been a 4th. However, I'm picking you didn't get an opportunity to get out there and do it, which is obviously we're all in that same boat regarding racing, which is kind of a bit of a bummer. However, yeah, mate. So you've won 3 back to back. 2018 was a good year for you, I saw, because you were European champion as well.
Yeah.
2018 was a good year for me as well.
Yeah.
That was one of my best seasons. So maybe we're connected in some way. But so tell us about the secret of winning, mate. How come you can win these titles back to back? Because that's a very hard thing to do.
It's funny, and I have been trying to work out exactly what it is. I think I just quite enjoy the suffering, and when things get tough, I'm not a quitter. I don't like to give up on things, and that's not necessarily a positive thing. I'm quite conscious that sometimes I'll just keep going at things that really I should have quit a long time ago. But it seems to work for me in 24-hour racing. This ability to just kind of suffer on and try and switch off the part of you that hurts from the part of you that keeps on going.
And in a 24-hour race, how at what point does it start hurting? You know, because I race, you know, some of my races in terms of pursuing are 4 minutes, and obviously that's straight into the red, and you're hurting 2 minutes in. But at what point in like a 24-hour race do you have to start having those conversations with yourself of like, okay, this is your choice. You knew you were going to get here. At what point does that happen?
It kind of happens right from the get-go for me anyway. I sort of split it into 3 8-hour chunks, each with slightly different mentalities. The first 8-hour, I tend to be like pushing myself quite hard. And so my heart rate's up. I'm not used to riding at sort of max heart rate because, well, I'm an endurance rider. So that hurts. And the first 8 hours seems to drag on quite a long time. And you're sort of looking at your watch going, is that really only 6 hours? Is that really only 7 hours? So there's that level of pain in the first 8 hours. The middle 8 hours are usually the dark hours, or at least going into the dark hours, and then there's a lot of cold and dark and I just want this race to be over kind of pain, and making deals with yourself about never doing it again and every single time. And then the last 8 hours, you're just hurting. Your arms really hurt from all the sort of technical riding, and your legs hurt obviously from the climbing. And it's just a case of pushing through the physical pain barrier then. But it's sort of 3 different chunks.
Interesting. And what's like, what's your kind of strategy when, obviously you break that down into chunks, and how do you say for instance in the second chunk going into the dark, because it's a funny thing for people who have never ridden through the night. It's kind of, it starts off exciting, doesn't it? Because like, wait, dark's coming, wait, this is exciting, and then it's like all of a sudden your life is just engulfed in this little ball of light, and that's all you see. And then the sheer reality of what you're about to do, riding through the night, kicks in. And so how do you kind of get yourself through that? And what's 4 a.m. like for you? Because 4 a.m. is pretty bad for me.
So I quite like talking to people when I'm out on the course, and if they're passing me or if I'm passing them, then I try and make a point of saying hi and sort of cheering people on, because I think that sort of touch with reality and with other people kind of keeps me going, and hopefully it helps them a bit as well. But in the dead of night, the course really thins out and you get far fewer people out. And so it's very much then a case of sort of talking yourself through it, not getting spooked by, animals running across the trail and that cobweb that you ride through that's just yeah. So looking after yourself at that stage.
Yeah. Is it like a constant dialogue you've got going on in your head, or have you have kind of long periods where you just kind of got the flow thing going on and you're just like, oh, this is good?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because the first, I would say similarly in the chunks, the first 8 hours, I'm constantly talking to myself because there's lots of people around and you're really having to concentrate on things. But by the time you get into the nighttime, it's just a case of, now I'm over this bit, now I'm over this bit. I remember the next bit, oh, that bit's a horrible bit. I'm glad I'm over that bit again. And you do sort of get into this sort of routine of each lap has its own sort of rhythm to it. And then you get earworms. I was talking to someone about the earworms that you get, and I typically have like tiny fragments of songs that just play over and over and over in my head, which at the start is okay, but by the end of the race it's really irritating.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah, and are they always the songs that you really don't want to hear? I remember on Touching the Void with Joe Simpson, how he's got Brown Girl in the Ring or something rattling around his head, and he's like, I absolutely hate that song.
It is usually really horrible jingly things that you listen to. Yeah, I tried to remember what some of them were. Unforgettable, the Nat King Cole song, is one that runs through my head quite a lot. Don't know why. I'm not a Nat King Cole fan. Generally don't listen to that kind of music. It seems to go on.
Yeah, oh, we're back at that stage again. Oh, great. How many hours is this gonna last?
For the next 16 hours.
Yeah. And what's your kind of strategy like for going into racing for 24 hours? Because it's obviously not like you just kind of go fly out from the gun, make sure in the lead group and you're there for the sprint at the end kind of thing. Because, I mean, I don't know, is it like that? I don't know. I've never done a 24-hour, well, no, I haven't done a 24-hour mountain bike race. So yeah, how do you kind of keep a track of, who's where, and because I presume that there's at times you stop to eat, or do you not stop to eat? So just talk, maybe just talk us through your standard, what you would consider like a standard kind of race for you over 24 hours.
Sure. The first couple of laps are usually the mental ones, because everyone starts from the same position. And so there's lots of fast racing off the start line so that you can get yourself in a good position. Typically the start's on a fire road or some wide bit of trail. But then you do get into the single track, so it's nice to get a good position before you start riding on the technical terrain. That usually only lasts for a couple of laps though, or at least it does for me. And then it's very much a case of dropping down into a heart rate zone where I know that I can keep myself going. In terms of stopping, laps typically last sort of 45 minutes to an hour, depending on the length of the course. So my aim usually for the first 8 hours is to stop as little as possible, just change a bottle, grab a couple of gels or some food or whatever, but not really stop. But through the night, I take slightly longer breaks in the pit stop, maybe 15 minutes having some warm food, one stop, or changing my gloves if the weather's bad, things like that. And then again in the morning, you sort of move slightly back into race modes. Typically, I don't know what the field is looking like, or don't like to know anyway, until at least halfway through. Just allows me to focus on my own riding and not worry about chasing. And because you start thinking about chasing people, you start moving out of your own race plan, your own heart rate zones, and that can really scupper your race. So that's typically a race for me.
Yeah. I guess over that sort of amount of time, you have to be really disciplined in terms of sticking to your plan, because I like you said, I guess if you get caught up in what the other racers are doing, and they may be a lap up, because I guess I don't know, is it kind of swings, where someone might be out a lap, and then all of a sudden someone else drops a lap because they get off and have a break, or I kind of picture it as almost like Formula One strategy in terms of when the pit stops come in and people are out on course, or and who I take it, do you have people in your pit who are kind of keeping track of what's going on? So when you say, right, where are we? What's the plan? Someone's there, you've got someone in your team that can give you that answer and say, right, okay, so so and so's leading, or you've got X amount of a lead. Is it how that kind of works?
Yeah, so I have really luckily always had my husband with me, Charlie, who's the most amazing pit crew I could hope for. He typically keeps completely on top of all of my nutrition and my hydration, keeps a tally on where the field is stacked, and just generally runs the pit. It's also really handy to have a mechanic there as well, because if something goes wrong with my bike, by the end of the night, there's just no chance I'm going to be capable of fixing it. So it's nice to have someone who can do that for you. And also, like, if the weather's really horrible, your bike just gets caked with mud, so you do need to clean it off sort of once a lap quite frequently. So that's Charlie's responsibility. It's quite nice to sort of devolve that to someone else, because it just gives me one less thing to worry about and think about when I'm out riding.
Yeah, it must be super challenging in terms of just riding or racing for that period of time. And I know, speaking to Mark Beaumont, he calls it idiot mode. After a certain amount of time, he goes into idiot mode, and just ask him questions that are yes no answers. If you ask him anything else, he's not. He just doesn't have the capacity to answer the question, because he's that destroyed.
Yeah.
And I would think after racing for, when you're up to kind of the late hours of 16, 17, 18 hours in, when it's dark and stuff, and it's just like, I would think, technical questions or trying to fix fiddly things are not anyone's strength.
Yeah. No, it definitely, the yes no questions really work, but also double check, because quite often I'll say yes when I mean no. So you usually have to ask a question a couple of times just to make sure that I'm answering the same way.
Yeah. Are you sure about that? Yes. No. I mean, I don't know. Yeah, I can imagine. It's incredibly challenging. So, mate, where did this kind of fixation for these long endurance events and this suffering kind of, how did that come about? Because you're is it something that is, you've always been into this? Like, people that generally win back-to-back things, there's generally like a bit of a kind of pedigree, and there's a pathway. People come through as juniors and go through the ranks. So is that kind of the way you've come through this, or?
No, not at all. In fact, I didn't really start cycling properly until I was about 35. I'd just gone through sort of this massive life change, and bumped into someone in the changing rooms at work, having commuted in, who was just sort of new to mountain biking, who like encouraged me out. And it started from there, really. 35 is not a particularly good age to go straight into short, fast racing. By the time you hit your 30s, by the time you hit your 30s, you're definitely much more of an endurance engine. And I think just from the start, I enjoyed going for long rides. Just where my head was at the time, taking that time for myself and sort of switching off completely and riding for long distances and long periods of time just suited me. And then a crowd of people from the club that I was in at work decided they were going to put teams together to enter a race in Scotland called the Strath Puffer, which for those of you who don't know, 24-hour racing world is reputedly the hardest 24-hour race. It's taking place in the north of Scotland, up near Strath Peffer, hence the name, in January. So you get pretty much 17 hours of darkness and all manner of weather thrown at you. And there were whole people from the club who wanted to do it in quads. And I stupidly signed up to do it in a pair. And it just all sort of blossomed from there, really. The natural progression from riding it in a pair, of course, is to ride it solo. And that's where it started.
Wow, that's a pretty heavy place to start, I would think. The in the Strath Puffer, for sure. There's probably some easier races that you could have probably delved into before that. But yeah, I mean, to give people who don't know on this call, I mean, some years you ride with the ground completely frozen and icy, and you're in kind of spiky tires just to stay upright. Some years is just wet Scottish winter mush where there's no snow at all. It's just completely horrific. And I think I've heard people go through a set of brake pads a lap on that, like it completely destroys your bike, that sort of stuff. So
yeah, I mean, the kind of rock that's up there, it's quite sandy anyway. So particularly if you're running organic pads, it can really rub them down really quickly. I've ridden it in all weathers. I think the first year I did it, there were sort of 4 feet of snow, and they ended up having to dig out the course the entire way around, which was quite interesting. And then I did it when it was sheet ice, and then I've done it a couple of times where it's just been riding through porridge. So,
which do you prefer, actually?
I like riding in snow. Riding in snow is fun, and when you fall off, it's soft.
Yeah, sometimes. Yeah, sometimes.
Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of ice, although ice tires make a massive difference. But because it's quite a rocky course at the top anyway, ice is really horrible because you just get this sort of thin veneer of ice on the surface, and the tires don't really stick to that.
Yeah. Becomes pretty frightening, I guess. So you said that you went through a bit of a huge life change. What I guess your cycling career has evolved out of that. What was life like before that, and what did what was your go-to then, I suppose, to get that kind of mind space and stuff?
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive change for me. So I had spent the previous 10 years in a sort of very controlling relationship. Coercive control is a massive sort of area of contention at the moment. Lots of talk about it in the news in terms of sort of domestic violence. And I ended up being in a relationship where I just didn't have any time for myself. I was quite controlled. My money was controlled. The things that I was meant to like and not like, friends, my family, I ended up not really seeing very many people. So I didn't really have that kind of release. And the relationship ended with a particularly violent incident, which just suddenly woke me up to everything else that had been happening, and I left. And it was pretty much at the same time that I had met this girl in the change room, started cycling and joined the bike club and met a few people through there. And the cycling at the time for me it was a way of escaping my head, of going somewhere where I just didn't have to think about what was actually happening in real life. But also it was a means for me to sort of heal myself and regain the strength of character and physical strength that I had before I'd been in this relationship. Because I had gone from I was a swimmer as a child, so I was strong, I was quite athletic, and I'd just gone to doing absolutely nothing when I was married. So yeah, it was kind of a rediscovery of the things that I enjoyed and the strength that I have inside myself and sort of physically.
And do you think going through that, do you think, I mean, I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, but do you think having gone through such a kind of challenging time and building that resilience, having to rediscover yourself and find yourself, do you think that makes you much stronger on a bike?
I think it's a really interesting question. I think I have much more determination now, I think, than I did before, because I know that I'm doing it for the right reasons. I know I'm doing it for me, and I know the benefits that it has for me. And so I think that keeps me going when perhaps I would not necessarily have the same sort of compulsion to go and ride my bike. It also has a positive effect on my sort of mental well-being as well. So these days, and I suffered quite badly from depression shortly after that incident. And these days now, it's very much a tool for me to keep myself sort of fit mentally as well. And so having that, knowing the benefit that it gives me, I guess, is probably another thing that keeps me going, that perhaps I wouldn't necessarily have if I hadn't been through all of that. So that's a long-winded way of saying yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's the kind of best way to say yes. I think it gives the detail, and like you say there, like, yeah, obviously your mental health took a huge knock, and how that again, that right now is a really hot topic. England's just gone back into a second lockdown. People struggled through the first, and I think at that point it was kind of new and maybe exciting for some people in some ways. But then the reality of, again, probably like a 24-hour mountain bike race, the start of it's fantastic, and you get to the middle, you think, oh, when's this going to end? And you get almost there, you think this is never going to end, and then hopefully you come out the other side of it. But how do you think? I guess how's the lockdown stuff affected you? Do you find yourself, you've obviously come up with a strategy to manage your mental health, and do you see do you have days of the lockdown where you think, oh God, you think about the past, or how are you finding, or how do you manage, how are you managing your mental health?
I'll be honest and say that there have been good days and bad. I suspect everyone falls into that camp. I think we were quite fortunate with the first lockdown. That sounds like a crazy thing to say, but the weather was nice.
Yeah.
And I think it encouraged a lot of people to go out and experience the joy of outside and the benefits of being out in the fresh air and the sunshine and just doing a bit of exercise. The benefits that they had on your mental well-being. There were times when I just didn't feel like getting out. I'm pretty sure that everyone's been in that situation. But my coping strategy for that is to just take the first step. And I would find myself just saying, right, well, if you just put your bike stuff on, you don't have to go out, but then you've got your bike stuff on if you want to. And then we'll just get your bike out the garage now. You might as well. You're not going out, but and then just like gradually persuade myself out. Because once you've taken that step outside, I have never, ever been on a ride that I've regretted. And I think that the hardest part is just making that first step.
Yeah, they call it the doorstep mile, don't they? Just get like the hardest mile of your whole journey is going to be just getting out your door. From where you're sitting right now to your door, that's going to be the hardest bit. And I completely feel that because I'm exactly the same. There's some days where I look out and I know I've got to go out and do 4 hours and it's lashing down, and you think, oh, I just want to put it off. I just want to put it off because I don't want to go out there. But actually, like you say, once you're out and you're wet, it doesn't really matter, does it? You're waterproof, it's fine.
And you get wet pretty quickly. And then there's the thing. So that's, yeah, and you dry off when you get home. Waterproof.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, a lot of adventures, people always say, why do you do that? And it's like, because the shower at the end of it is always so much better than just a normal shower. You know, it's like, it's small things, isn't it? You got to keep those small things and like, yeah, this is awesome. At the end of this, how many times you've been on a ride where you just think, God, I can't wait to get in that hot shower.
So much, and we're heading into winter now, so it's going to be pretty much every ride.
I was going to say for you, that's probably like wet and muddy and stuff on every ride is probably that's the dream, isn't it?
Yeah, my poor bikes, they go through so much trauma over the winter.
Yeah, I bet you certainly you certainly put them through the mill. So in terms of just jumping back to the kind of mental health side of things, what do you think the kind of public perception is on mental health, and how, you know, I guess going into the lessons you've learned through your journey, what do you think would help, you know, if put it into perspective? So, you know, someone might be listening to this and freaking out because they're going into a second lockdown and just like, oh God, this is horrific. I'm not sure I'm going to get through this. And I've certainly had friends and, you know, people have contacted me in the last few weeks, excuse me, just saying, you know what, mate, I'm just having a bad time today, you know. And it's kind of, I always think I've been through a dark place with my eyesight diagnosis and stuff, and have kind of come out the other side. Nothing as horrific as by the sounds of what you have, but you kind of, you know, you build this resilience and think, oh, you know, I think you get this balance. I've worked out there's this balance, and as long as you stay somewhere in the middle of it, and your emotions will swing either side on good days and bad days, good days and bad days. But as long as you don't let your emotions pull you too far either way, you kind of stay pretty okay with everything that's going on around you. You realize when the good days are good, they're probably not going to last, but let's enjoy it. And then when the bad days are bad, you think, well, this is a bit rubbish, but it's got to get good soon.
Exactly.
And that sounds like a lot of my bikepacking adventures, to be honest, as well. So what lessons have you learned that you think could kind of help people? And you know, they could be lessons from, you know, your past marriage, or they could be lessons from your new, you know, marriage with Charlie, bike racing. What advice could we glean from the you know, the knowledge that you have on this subject?
It's actually really cool. I did a talk on exactly this at work last week. So I've got a few pointers up my sleeve already. I'd say that concentrating on today and not worrying about how long it's going to last, how it's going to affect you down the line, things that may or may not happen, is really important for my mental health. It's really helped me to not get overwhelmed by things, because you don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. So you can only really focus on the things that are happening to you just now. So trying to be a bit sort of present in the situation really helps. And like I said before about getting out on your bike, if you break it down into little chunks, that helps too. And just like tackle a bit that you can deal with. You might not be able to deal with it all, but if you can deal with a little bit of it, or go for those, you know, those small wins. It might be that you can't get out and visit someone, but maybe you can give them a phone call, or just try and give yourself those positives. I'm trying to think of the other things that I said. I mean, you said it, you're going to have good days and bad days, but the bad, there's always an end to the bad days, right? It's like a big hill. You can climb for hours, it feels like hours on end, but there will be a top at the end. And then you get a nice downhill at the other side. And it might feel really crappy just now, but it's not going to be crappy forever. And another thing is, if you can't control the thing that's bothering you, then try not to let it bother you so much. Because I think we worry a lot about things that are just out with our control. And so rather than worry about it, find ways to deal with those things in a different way.
Yeah, it's very on a standard athlete talk, really. It's kind of like, you know, focus on the process now, don't worry about the outcome. Because if you've done everything you can to get the process right, there's a good chance the outcome will take care of itself. And even if the outcome isn't what you planned, i.e. you don't win, you know, if you know you've done your best, you kind of have to shake the other person's hand and go, fair play, man. I got beat. I couldn't have done any more on this day, and that's it. And it's I guess in a way it's kind of a good metaphor for life as well. It's, you know, like control what you can control and try not to let everything else, you know, run by you, which is obviously a lot easier said than done. I've just finished watching very, very late, and there'll be a lot of people go, God, you've just watched that? But a series called The Last Dance on Michael Jordan, the Chicago Bulls. And I found that really, really interesting when you had all these people saying that, you know, like, I don't think there's any disputing Michael Jordan's probably the greatest player that we've ever seen, or certainly of my generation.
Yeah.
And it was interesting to hear people say that, you know, he wasn't the biggest, he wasn't the strongest, he probably wasn't the most skilled, but the fact that he was always present was the thing that he was so good at, and he never worried about missing a game-winning shot. And like he says, why would I worry about a shot that I haven't even taken yet?
Totally.
You know, and it's just that thing about, you know, I think for someone to, if you think the amount of times you're on a bike and you can be absolutely present in a race, like the race is going well, you know, it's only when your mind starts to wander and be like, oh, this is hurting so much, and oh God, you know, when's the next lap coming up, and all those sorts of things. That's when things start to spiral, isn't it? And get you know, start to lose your mind. Whereas actually, if you can stay in the moment, like you say, knowing that, yeah, it's bad right now, but it'll get better. You know, it'll get better. And you must see massive swings of that in a 24-hour bike race, like huge. I mean, have you ever done, like, I don't know if you could do this, but like almost like some sort of verbal diary of what a race looks like? Because I reckon there must be crazy ebbs and flows of, whoa, this is the best thing ever, and like you say, you've promised yourself you'd never ever do this again.
Yeah, I do that quite a lot. I mean, there's bits that you don't look forward to riding as well. So there's definitely moments where you're like, oh, thank goodness that's over for another lap. Or, you know, those horrible climbs that you get to the top and you can barely breathe. And then there's the really, really fun downhill bits that you just look forward to doing. I think it's more about the pattern of things. And like I'm saying, just focusing on the next little bit and getting over that, and then looking at the next little bit. And those little rewards of that nice little section that you get to ride downhill after putting up with the horrible bit.
Yeah. How hard on yourself are you when you start to get a bit kind of carried away with yourself and you start focusing on not just the next little bit, but, you know, well, I've got 3 bits and then there's that horrible bit, and you get like a bit ahead of yourself. Are you pretty quick to recognize, you know, in your own head, like, right, okay, hang on, you know, let's just bring it back to the present now. I'm here now. Let me get through this bit. Do you are you pretty brutal on yourself when that happens, or are you quite forgiving?
No, I am now. I am pretty brutal with myself now because it's really caught me out before. I've gotten the very first race that I did. I got to, I must have been sort of between 2 and 4 in the morning. I can't quite remember. And I was exhausted, and just thinking about going out and doing another lap was horrible, because I knew that it wasn't just another lap. It was another 8 hours of riding, or however long it was. And you just can't afford to get into that mindset, because that, like you say, it just makes you sort of spiral. What you just need to do is just do another lap and then see how you are at the end of that one. Because it is just one more lap, just one more lap.
Mm, yeah. What's the biggest or best bribe you've ever told yourself out there and just gone, right, okay, if I get around this lap, I'm gonna do this. What's the most outrageous thing you've said to yourself to get you around another lap?
So, I mean, I pretty much every race that I do, I will tell myself I don't have to do another race. That's fairly common practice these days, but I will make like crazy bargains with myself, or imaginings like you sort of hear cars or a motorbike, because sometimes there are bikes around the track, and you think, oh, maybe someone's had a terrible crash. That's really awful, but they might cancel the race, and so then the race, and I don't have to ride anymore. I think so that's fine. So all sorts of things go through your head.
Fantastic, isn't it? And if I'm sure if we could plug into other people's heads at certain points, it'd be like, everyone thinks that they've got their own stuff going on, but I think if you could plug into other people's heads at different times, you'd be like, oh no, I thought I was bad, but that person's a way another level. Yeah, yeah. To put yourself through that is absolutely mental. So what are the signs? What are the triggers we should be looking out for in terms of, hey, we're going into another lockdown. There are going to be some people that are going to struggle through this. As friends and family and colleagues, what are the things that we can kind of look out for, having been in that situation? And I'm sure at some point you were probably begging for help, internally, but maybe not being able to voice it externally. What do you think are some of the cues that we could that we should keep an eye out for as we head into this second lockdown of this pandemic and try and get through this as a nation?
Yeah, and I think it's quite hard when everyone's working remotely, because you're not around the person so much. But if you notice changes in their working patterns, if this is someone at work, if they're maybe not as communicative as they were, or if they take longer to answer, or if maybe they're not online as much as you think, those are things that typically sort of would send alarm bells for me. Maybe someone's work has deteriorated, they're not as productive as they normally are. In sort of social life, if you do have the opportunity to see people, then just generally a change in mood is often a good indication. And yeah, everyone's going to struggle a bit, right? So no one's going to be going, yay, lockdown. But it will be obvious, I think, if someone is struggling. And the best thing to do, I think, is to just be direct. Just don't ask them if they're okay, because everyone's immediate response to "are you okay" is to say yes. Ask the difficult question. Ask if they're struggling mentally, because then they'll have to say no to that if it's not the case, and it's always harder to say no than it is to say yes. So ask the direct question. For me personally, what really helped was not planning to do things with people, but people just pitching up and saying, let's go for a walk. Because having something planned is then an extra pressure for you. You know that you've got to be in a good space or capable of doing something at a particular time. And it feels like too much pressure. But if you as a friend or a family member recognize these behaviors in your friend or family member, then just turn up at the door and invite them out for a walk, or I don't know, a coffee if you're able to get to a coffee shop or something, and have that direct conversation.
Yeah, no doubt that's a very challenging one. I think I was probably looking back, I was probably in denial. Like, I knew I wasn't well, and I think a lot of people around me knew I wasn't in a great space. But I wasn't willing to admit that, my life had just got my biggest dream becoming a mountain guide was just like out the window, you know. So you're just kind of like, oh, right, okay, I need to work out who I am now and what direction I want to go in. But I think, you know, talking to you tonight, I kind of see familiarities in the whole kind of, you know what, if you get through something like that, you get help, and you get through something like that, actually the other side's pretty beautiful, you know, and there's opportunity that spiral out of that, and you know, don't shut yourself away, you know, really go after those kind of opportunities, because they will be there. And I remember at the start of the first lockdown, when it was all doom and gloom, and I said to, you know, and I kind of said to myself, right, so this isn't great, it's not great for anyone, however, there are going to be opportunities. So, you know, just don't bury your head and think this is a horrible time. There's going to be opportunities that are going to spiral out of this. And the World in a Day with Mark Beaumont was one of them, which was fantastic. I started this Instalive kind of series, talking to people and hearing their stories, which has been, you know, really cool, and the feedback's amazing. So getting interesting people on like yourself to talk about and share your stories is, you know, it's just great, isn't it? Because I think people you kind of get wrapped up in your busy day, in your busy world, and you know, and it's not often, besides a bit of social media, that we actually stop and look and, oh, what's so and so up to, or what are they up to, and it's quite nice as well to talk to people, even though it's on a screen, and go, hey, how's your day, what you been up to, what's your deal, you know. So yeah, so I think knowing that, you know, the big picture is it's not going to be this bad forever. It's you know, we will get over this. It will be fine. And hey, out the other side of it, think of all the lessons that you would have learned. And one of the support staff we have at British Cycling, called Performance Lifestyle, said to me right at the start, he said, everything you achieved during this lockdown, this first lockdown, I want you to make a note of in a diary on a bit of paper. Because he said, I think you'll be quite surprised that how much you achieve during this. And, you know, and I think when you look back on it, you'll think, actually, well, that was quite a productive period. And this was just that, you know, obviously lockdown came right as we'd just been told that there's no games this year. Your racing calendar's been scrapped. That's it. And you're kind of thinking, right, okay. For me, it kind of 43, I'm thinking, can I make another year? Have I got another games in me? You know, so yeah, you know, it was a kind of great way. But then I was talking to a friend of mine on a ride on Friday, and just sort of saying, you know, like I found that bit of paper the other day, and it went from, you know, one side of A4 to the other side of A4 to then scribbles up the margin. And, you know, I started the second sheet, but I haven't found that yet. But, you know, you kind of look back and think, wow, this is, you know, this is really amazing. So maybe for people watching, maybe for yourself, you know, like second lockdown, keep a diary of what you achieve, and see, you know, that, hey, a pretty rubbish time can also be a pretty productive time. So
and it's amazing what actually just writing these things down does for you as well. You know, it's a thing that you can refer back to and say, well, actually, you know, these things I've all done. And so if you are having a particularly bad day, you can then use it as a tool to sort of reflect on the positives that have come from the period, when really sometimes all you can focus on is the bad stuff.
yeah, absolutely. It's very, very easy to fall into that trap, isn't it? We haven't got a lot of time here, but let's talk bikepacking, because you've just had a pretty amazing journey. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because I believe you're going back for more.
Yeah, right. So I just rode a trail in Scotland. Given that there were no races or anything on the calendar, I thought just set myself an individual goal. And it's a trail that was developed a few years ago, so it's relatively new, that runs from the centre of Glasgow, which is Scotland's biggest city, all the way up to the very far northwest, to Cape Wrath. And it's pretty much all on like hydro access roads, some single trail, a few sort of minor roads and forestry roads. So it's mostly off-road, although there are road sections. But it's just this incredible journey through bits of Scotland that we wouldn't otherwise have access to were it not for the hydroelectric industry and wind turbines and things. and also some really sort of old military roads from the Jacobite period. 560 kilometers it is all in, with I think about 10,000 meters of climbing, and a rather nice section of hike bike. And my plan was to set off and do it in a record time in under 3 days, which is the current record. But it was kind of scuppered right from the off, for a number of different reasons. And you can read all about it if you're interested. I've written a blog about it, so you can read about the things that stuffed me up. But the very end of the trip, or for me, as it turned out, the very start, there is a foot passenger only ferry crossing that you have to take from Durness across to the Cape Wrath road, and that's the only way that you can get across. There's no vehicular access any other way. And by the time I got there, the weather was just atrocious, far too windy to take the ferry crossing, and so I didn't actually complete the trip. I missed that last 20 kilometers, so I just have to go back and do it again. But it was a really interesting experience for me because normally, you know, I'm very goal focused. So my goal for this was to set an FKT. And I knew from the very start that that was never going to happen. And the old me, I think, would have just made excuses and probably not started. Or if I did start, I would have made excuses throughout and maybe not finished, stopped the day in or whatever. But I have found that my mental attitude has changed and advanced over the last few years, dealing with sort of grit and a view of a different type of success. And so I did it anyway. I did 540 kilometers of it. I think probably had I been able to take that ferry, I would have made it well within the 3 days, and set an FKT. But that's enough for me. If I go back and do it, I can do it.
I remember you posting on Instagram about, you know, I was going for this fastest known time, but I was kind of couldn't do it because of the stupid fear and stuff. And I think I replied something like, you know, you would have got the time. All your friends know, all the people around you know you would have got time. Does it really matter?
Exactly.
Does it really matter? Yeah. So I'm surprised you came on this. I'm sure you just leave me alone. Don't give me that stuff now, mister. Absolutely, mate. Absolutely. And what have you got planned coming up? I know you've got a big adventure plan, which you're still as under wraps and you can't talk about. But what have you got in the interim between now and kind of that kicks off? What's in store for Naomi?
So I've got a few little local trips that I'm hoping to do, mostly sort of gear testing trips to try and hone the gear that I'm going to take for this big trip that is in the planning for next year. I'm really lucky that I have support from Mason Cycles, and I would like to just give them a big shout out if that's okay.
Absolutely.
They've supported me through a lot of my adventures, and they helped me out on Anturas More, the trip that I did in Scotland, loaning me their new In Search Of adventure bike, which was just stunning for the route. And they're going to be supporting me next year as well on this trip. So I'll be trying out the bike with sort of different packing, taking different gear. I've got to pack for some fairly cold temperatures. So it's trying to see how much I can fit on a bike. I have also got the potential loan of a trailer, so I might see if a trailer is a better mode of transportation for all of the stuff that I need to take with me. So it's lots of experimenting, I think, over the winter. Lots of winter weather, cold weather riding to get myself used to cold, and lots of miles.
Woohoo! Sounds very exciting. We cannot wait to hear what that is. And while we're on sponsors, mate, give us a shout out. Who are you sponsored by, and who are the guys that are helping you do what you do? So
Mason Cycles, I mentioned, they're absolutely amazing. Their adventure bikes are just award-winning. Go check them out. They're really cool. I'm sponsored clothing-wise by Gore, who keep me kitted out sort of spring through winter. And in Scotland, I need so much kit, so it's great that they've got me covered. literally. And Exposure lights, who keep me going through the night. They are exceptional lights, and they're perfect for 24-hour racing, and for the bikepacking as well. So another shout out to them.
Yeah, no, I use Exposure, which are yeah, are amazing for a blind guy who can't see in the dark. They're a game changer when I came across them. I think I got like 4 or 5 of them downstairs, and they've been very kind to kind of help me out a couple of times with racing in the Arctic and things like that. So they're a great British brand and great bunch of folk.
Totally.
So happy days, mate. Well, hey, listen, thank you so much for taking the time to come and chat to us. It's been absolutely lovely.
Thank you very much for having me on. It's been a real pleasure.
Nice one, buddy. And we wish you all the best. And lastly, actually, where can we, how can we follow you? How can we find out about what you're up to and these adventures that you're planning and you're testing and all that sort of jazz? What's the best place to stalk you on?
Stalk me here on Instagram is probably the best. Freireich74. I don't know if that comes up or not, but if it doesn't, then that's who I am. I'm occasionally on Twitter as Naomi74, not quite so much. And I occasionally blog, but I'll link it all from my Instagram. Instagram really is the best place for you to keep in touch with me.
Happy days. Awesome. So jump on, follow Naomi and follow her adventures and keep up to date with what she's up to. But yeah, I hope this lockdown is a very positive one for you, my friend.
Thank you.
Happy travels and riding, and hopefully we can, out the other side of this, we can share a trail or two and have a laugh.
That would be amazing.
Happy days. Nice one, mate. Take care, and we'll speak soon.
See you later.
See you later, mate.
Bye.
So there we go, folks. The lovely Naomi. What an absolute champion. 24-hour bike racing champion, European champion. She is the business. And hey, overcoming some incredible mental health stuff too, with some great tips for everyone. So thank you very much for tuning in, guys. I appreciate it all the time. Tuesday night, have a pleasant evening for the rest of the night. Take care and see you again soon. Cheers, guys.